The champagne flute slipped from Layla's fingers as she recognized the man stepping out of the black Escalade. 3 stories below her penthouse catering station, Sheikh Khalil al-Rashid emerged into the Chicago night, his presence commanding even from this distance. The same man whose coffee she'd served every Tuesday morning at his downtown office for the past 8 months. The same man whose quiet, "Thank you, Layla," had become the highlight of her week, and now, somehow, he was the groom at the bachelor party she'd been hired to cater through her weekend side business. The glass shattered against the marble floor, crystal fragments catching the city lights like fallen stars. Layla's hands trembled as she knelt to collect the pieces, her mind racing through the implications. She'd taken this job through an intermediary, a friend of a friend who'd promised good money for discretionary service at a private celebration. No names, no details, just an address in Gold Coast and instructions to prepare traditional Middle Eastern appetizers alongside American favorites. She'd needed the money desperately. Her mother's medical bills from the cancer treatment had drained her savings, and her day job as an administrative assistant barely covered rent on their South Side apartment. But this changed everything. Khalil couldn't see her here. Not like this. Not when she'd built such careful professional boundaries at the office, when she'd worked so hard to be seen as competent and reliable, rather than just another struggling single mother taking whatever work she could find. The elevator chimed, and voices echoed through the penthouse. Male laughter, the clink of car keys being tossed onto a table, the rustle of expensive suits being loosened after a long day. Layla pressed herself against the kitchen wall, heart hammering as she listened to the group settle into the main living area. Through the service window, she caught glimpses of movement. A dozen men, maybe more, all carrying themselves with the easy confidence that came from never having to check bank balances or worry about next month's rent. "Khalil, you magnificent bastard," someone called out in a thick Boston accent. 3 weeks until you tie the knot with the pharmaceutical heiress. Tonight's your last night of freedom. Layla's stomach dropped. Engaged. Of course he was engaged. Men like Sheikh Khalil al-Rashid didn't stay single long, especially not when they'd built renewable energy empires that spanned 3 continents. She'd read about him in Forbes, seen the carefully staged photos of him at charity galas and groundbreaking ceremonies. But she'd never seen mention of a fiancé, never noticed a ring during those brief Tuesday morning encounters when he'd pause at her desk to discuss scheduling changes or ask about her weekend plans with genuine interest that had felt almost too good to be true. "Amara's a good match," Khalil's voice carried into the kitchen, warm but measured. "Duh, her family's pharmaceutical research aligns with our sustainability initiatives. The merger will fund clean water projects across North Africa and the Middle East." A merger, not love, but strategy. Layla found herself gripping the edge of the granite counter, surprised by the sharp pang of disappointment that cut through her chest. What had she expected? That the quiet moments they'd shared, the way his eyes lingered when she handed him his coffee, the time he'd asked about her mother's health with such careful concern, meant anything beyond professional courtesy. The caterer's contact had been specific about timing. Serve the appetizers at 8 refresh drinks throughout the evening, and disappear by midnight when the Ek entertainment arrived. Layla had assumed that meant a DJ or maybe a comedian. Now she realized it probably meant something she didn't want to witness, something that would make her Tuesday morning coffee exchanges even more impossible to navigate. She could leave, pack up her supplies, forfeit the payment, and slip out through the service entrance. But the money from tonight would cover her mother's next round of treatments. Dr. Martinez had been clear about the timeline. Without the experimental therapy, they were looking at months, not years, and insurance had already denied the claim twice. The kitchen timer chimed. The lamb kibbe was ready, golden and fragrant with sumac and pine nuts. Layla closed her eyes, steadied her breathing, and made her choice. She would stay, serve the food professionally, and pray that Khalil wouldn't venture into the kitchen. She'd done harder things. She'd held her mother's hand through chemotherapy. She'd worked 3 jobs while finishing her business degree at night. She could handle one evening of invisible service. The first hour passed smoothly. Layla arranged platters with practiced efficiency, sending trays out through the service window for the hired waitstaff to distribute. She caught fragments of conversation as she worked. Talk of oil futures and carbon credits, plans for a new solar installation in Phoenix, debate about whether the Cubs had any chance this season. Normal, wealthy guy conversation, nothing that made her feel like she was intruding on something private. But then the tone shifted. Someone suggested they move the party to a strip club downtown. Another voice recommended calling an escort service, the kind of suggestions that made Layla's skin crawl. Not because she judged the women who did that work, but because she'd spent years fighting to be seen as more than just another pretty face who might be available for the right price. "That's not happening," Khalil's voice cut through the suggestions with quiet authority. "Find something else to celebrate. Come on, man," the Boston accent persisted. "It's your bachelor party. Live a little." I said no. The finality in Khalil's tone ended the discussion. Layla found herself smiling despite her anxiety. She'd seen glimpses of this side of him at the office, the way he'd shut down inappropriate comments from clients, the respect he showed to everyone from the cleaning crew to the senior partners. But hearing him defend that principle even in private, even when his friends were pushing him to abandon it, made something warm unfurl in her chest. The evening continued with card games and increasingly elaborate toasts to Khalil's future happiness. Layla refilled platters and tried not to listen too closely to the stories his friends shared about their college years at Northwestern, their spring breaks in Dubai, their casual mentions of trust funds and family compounds. A world so far removed from her own that it might as well have been another planet. Around 10:30, disaster struck. One of the guests, clearly several drinks past his limit, stumbled into the kitchen looking for the bathroom. He was tall, blonde, with the kind of aggressive confidence that made Layla instinctively step back toward the stove. "Well, hello there," he slurred, eyes traveling over her catering uniform in a way that made her skin crawl. "You're much prettier than the usual help. What's your name, sweetheart?" "The bathroom is down the hall to your left," Layla said firmly, not answering his question. "Don't be unfriendly." He moved closer, backing her against the counter. "I'm sure we could work out some kind of tip arrangement. Cash is no object. Please step back." Layla's voice remained steady, but her heart was racing. She'd dealt with this before, at other catering gigs, at the restaurant where she'd worked through college. But never in such an enclosed space, never when she couldn't simply walk away. Come on, don't be like that." His hand reached toward her arm. "Remove your hand, now." The new voice was ice-cold and absolutely commanding. Khalil stood in the kitchen doorway, his presence filling the space with barely controlled fury. The drunk guest spun around, nearly losing his balance. "Khalil, you were just leaving." Khalil's tone could have frozen Lake Michigan in July. "Marcus will call you a car. You're done for the evening." The man opened his mouth to protest, took one look at Khalil's expression, and thought better of it. He stumbled out of the kitchen without another word, leaving Layla alone with her boss in the sudden silence. "Are you all right?" Khalil's voice had transformed completely, warm with concern and something that might have been recognition. Layla nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Up close, she could see the details that distance had hidden. The way his dark hair was slightly mussed from running his hands through it. The faint lines around his eyes that spoke of long days and heavy responsibilities. The expensive watch that probably cost more than her annual salary, but somehow didn't feel ostentatious on his wrist. "Layla." He said her name like he was testing it, confirming what he'd already suspected. "You're the caterer tonight." It wasn't a question. She nodded again, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "I didn't know it was your party when I took the job. I can leave if this is awkward." "Don't." The word came out sharper than he'd intended. He softened his tone. "Please don't leave. I had no idea you did catering on weekends. I do a lot of things on weekends." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "My mother's medical bills are expensive." Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, which she would have hated, but understanding. "The cancer treatment you mentioned." She was surprised he remembered. Their Tuesday conversations were brief, professional. She'd mentioned her mother's illness only once, months ago, when she'd needed to leave early for a doctor's appointment. "The insurance company keeps finding new reasons to deny coverage for the experimental therapy. Apparently, hope is too expensive for their budget." Khalil was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "The food tonight is exceptional, the lamb kibbeh especially. Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother. She came here from Lebanon in the 60s, worked in restaurant kitchens until she saved enough to open her own place in Dearborn. She taught me that food is how we show love, how we build bridges between cultures." Layla found herself relaxing despite the strange circumstances. She used to say that a good meal could solve most of the world's problems if people would just sit down together long enough to share it. She sounds like a wise woman. She passed last year, right before my mother's diagnosis. Sometimes I think she would have known exactly what to do about all of this. Layla gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the party beyond, the impossible situation they found themselves in. "What would you do if money weren't an issue?" The question caught her off guard. "I'd open my own restaurant, something that honored my grandmother's recipes but made them accessible to everyone, not just people who could afford Gold Coast prices. I'd hire people from the community, create jobs that paid living wages, maybe partner with local farms for fresh ingredients." She stopped, embarrassed by her own enthusiasm. "Sorry. You didn't ask for my life plan?" "Actually, I did." Khalil leaned against the counter, his formal posture relaxing slightly. "And it sounds like an excellent plan. What's stopping you?" Layla almost laughed. "Reality? Starting a restaurant requires capital I don't have, credit I can't qualify for, and time I can't spare when I'm working 2 jobs to keep my mother alive. What if those obstacles could be removed?" There was something in his tone that made her look at him more carefully. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, voices from the living room grew louder. Someone was calling for the guest of honor, wondering where he'd disappeared to. Khalil glanced toward the door, then back at Layla. "I should get back to my guests, but Layla—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Would you be willing to meet with me next week? Not at the office. Somewhere we can talk privately about your restaurant idea. I don't understand. I invest in sustainable businesses that benefit local communities. Your concept sounds exactly like the kind of project my foundation supports." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, wrote something on the back. "This is my personal number. Call me Tuesday afternoon." Layla took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, warm and electric. "Khalil, I can't accept charity." "It wouldn't be charity. It would be business." His eyes met hers, serious and intent. "I've been looking for the right partner for a community-focused restaurant initiative. Someone who understands both the cultural significance of food and the practical challenges of running a sustainable business. Someone who cares more about impact than profit margins." "But you're getting married. Your fiancé is a business arrangement." The words came out flat, matter-of-fact. "A merger that will benefit both our families' humanitarian efforts." Personal feelings weren't part of the negotiation. The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. "That sounds lonely." "It is." He was quiet for a moment. "But it's the life I was born into. Duty before desire. Family legacy before personal happiness." "Your grandmother," Layla said softly. What would she say about that?" Khalil's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. "How did you get the same look I do when you talk about family obligations, like you're carrying someone else's dreams along with your own. She would say that a life lived only for others is no life at all." His voice was barely above a whisper. "She would tell me to find my own path, even if it meant disappointing people who claim to love me." Maybe she still is telling you that. Their eyes met and held. In the space between heartbeats, Layla felt the world shift slightly, like tectonic plates finding a new alignment. This wasn't just about a business opportunity or a chance encounter at a bachelor party. This was about two people recognizing something in each other that they'd been searching for without realizing it. "Khalil!" The voice from the living room was getting impatient. "The car's here for Marcus, and we're starting the next round of poker." "I have to go," he said, but he didn't move immediately. Promise me you'll call Tuesday." "I promise." He nodded, started toward the door, then turned back. "Layla, for what it's worth, I'm glad you took this job tonight, even if the circumstances are complicated." After he left, Layla stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the business card in her hand. The front was standard corporate design, all clean lines and expensive paper, but on the back, in handwriting that was surprisingly warm and personal, he'd written, "For dreams that deserve to become reality." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Layla finished her service, packed up her supplies, and collected her payment from the event coordinator. But her mind was elsewhere, turning over the conversation with Khalil, the unexpected offer, the way he'd looked at her when she'd mentioned his grandmother. She drove home through the empty Chicago streets, past the late-night diners and 24-hour laundromats that served people like her, people who worked multiple jobs and counted every dollar. But for the first time in months, she wasn't calculating bills or worrying about next week's expenses. Instead, she was imagining what it would feel like to walk into her own restaurant, to see families gathered around tables sharing meals she'd created, to employ people from her neighborhood and pay them enough to support their own dreams. When she got home, her mother was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle. The chemotherapy had stolen her hair and 20 pounds, but her eyes were still bright with curiosity and stubborn hope. "How was the catering job, Habibti?" her mother asked, using the Arabic endearment that always made Layla feel like a child again. "Complicated," Layla said, settling into the chair across from her. "But maybe good complicated." She told her mother about the evening, about Khalil's unexpected offer, about the possibility that had opened up like a door she hadn't even known existed. Her mother listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow at particularly surprising details. "This man," her mother said, when Layla finished, "you trust him?" "I think so. He's always been respectful at work. And tonight—" Layla paused, trying to find the right words. "Tonight he protected me when he didn't have to. He listened when he could have just written me off as the help. And he's engaged to someone else." "Yes." Layla's voice was small. "A business arrangement," he said. Her mother was quiet for a long moment, studying her daughter's face. "Your grandmother used to say that the heart knows things the mind hasn't figured out yet. But she also said that a smart woman listens to both before making important decisions. What are you saying?" "I'm saying that good opportunities don't come along often, especially for people like us. If this man can help you build the restaurant you've dreamed about, if he can give you the chance to create something meaningful, then you should take it. But be careful with your heart, Habibti. Rich men have complicated lives, and women like us often pay the price for their complications." Tuesday afternoon arrived grey and drizzly, typical October weather in Chicago. Layla had spent the weekend researching Khalil's business ventures, reading about his foundation's work in renewable energy and community development. Everything she found reinforced her impression of him as someone who genuinely cared about making a positive impact, not just accumulating wealth. She called his personal number at exactly 2 o'clock, her hands slightly shaky as she dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Layla, I was hoping you'd call. I've been thinking about your offer," she said, trying to keep her voice professional. "I'm interested in learning more." "Good. Are you free this evening? I know a place in Lincoln Park where we can talk privately." They met at a small Ethiopian restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. It was the kind of neighborhood place that survived on loyal locals rather than tourist traffic, with mismatched chairs and walls covered in photographs of the owner's family. Khalil was already waiting when Layla arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee and a manila folder. "I hope you don't mind the location," he said as she sat down. "I wanted somewhere we could talk without running into anyone from my usual circles." "It's perfect." Layla looked around appreciatively. "This is exactly the kind of atmosphere I'd want to create. Comfortable, authentic, welcoming." They ordered dinner and talked for 2 hours. Khalil had done his homework, researching successful community-focused restaurants in Detroit, Austin, and Oakland. He'd identified potential locations in Chicago neighborhoods that were experiencing revitalization without full gentrification. He'd even contacted a lawyer who specialized in small business development and immigrant entrepreneurship. "Or I'm not just offering funding," he explained, as they shared a plate of injera and various stews. "I'm proposing a partnership. My foundation would provide startup capital and ongoing support, but you'd maintain majority ownership and complete creative control. The goal is to create a sustainable model that could be replicated in other cities." "Why me?" Layla asked. "You could partner with established chefs, people with restaurant experience and business connections, because established chefs with business connections don't need my help. They already have access to capital and networks." Khalil leaned forward, his expression intense. "I've watched you at the office for months. You're organized, creative, and you care about people. You treat everyone with respect, from the senior partners to the cleaning crew. Those aren't skills you can teach. They're character traits that either exist or they don't." "And you think I have good character?" There was something almost flirtatious in her tone, despite her efforts to keep things professional. "I think you have excellent character. I also think you're brilliant and underestimated, which is a combination that often produces extraordinary results when given the right opportunity." The compliment made her cheeks warm. "What about your fiancée? Won't she have opinions about you partnering with another woman?" Khalil's expression grew carefully neutral. "Amara and I have an understanding. Our marriage is a strategic alliance between our families. We both have our own interests and projects. As long as we fulfill our public obligations, we maintain our private independence." "That sounds incredibly sad." "It's practical. Emotion complicates business decisions." "Does it?" Layla challenged. "And because some of the best restaurants I know were started by people who were passionate about their food, their community, their vision. Emotion drove them to work 18-hour days and risk everything for something they believed in." Khalil was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. "You're right. I've spent so long thinking like a businessman that I'd forgotten what it feels like to want something just because it matters to you, not because it makes strategic sense. What matters to you, besides your foundation and your family obligations?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at her across the small table, candlelight flickering between them, and for a moment his carefully maintained composure slipped. "Honestly, sitting in restaurants like this one, talking to someone who challenges my assumptions and makes me remember why I wanted to help people in the first place. Conversations that feel real instead of calculated." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Khalil, I know this is complicated," he said quickly. "I know my situation makes everything more difficult, but I meant what I said about the restaurant. This isn't about personal feelings. It's about creating something meaningful." But even as he said it, they both knew it wasn't entirely true. The connection between them was undeniable, electric in a way that had nothing to do with business partnerships and everything to do with the way he looked at her when she laughed, the way she found herself leaning closer when he spoke about his dreams for sustainable development in underserved communities. They parted that evening, with plans to meet again the following week. Khalil would have his lawyer draw up preliminary partnership documents. Layla would work on a detailed business plan and scout potential locations. Everything professional, everything above board. But as Layla drove home through the city lights, she couldn't stop thinking about the moment when their hands had accidentally touched, reaching for the check. The way he'd looked at her when she described her vision for a restaurant that would serve as a community gathering place, not just a business. Her mother was asleep when she got home, but she'd left a note on the kitchen table. Dr. Martinez called. Insurance approved the experimental treatment. We start Monday. I don't know how this happened, but I'm grateful. Layla stared at the note, her heart racing. The treatment her mother needed cost $30,000. Insurance had denied it twice. There was no reason for them to suddenly change their minds unless... She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Khalil's number. It was late, probably too late to call, but she needed to know. He answered immediately. Layla, is everything all right? Did you pay for my mother's treatment? There was a pause. I don't know what you mean. The insurance company approved her experimental therapy today, after months of denials. That doesn't just happen, Khalil. Another pause. Longer this time. Maybe they reconsidered based on new medical evidence. Or maybe a wealthy man with connections made some phone calls and wrote a very large check. Layla, don't lie to me. Please. If we're going to be partners, if we're going to work together, I need honesty between us. She heard him sigh. Yes, I made some calls. I have connections at the insurance company, and I may have mentioned that denying coverage for a treatment that could save someone's life seemed inconsistent with their stated commitment to patient care. And the $30,000 was donated anonymously to a fund that helps cover experimental treatments for cancer patients. Your mother's case happened to qualify. Layla felt tears prick her eyes. Why? Because you shouldn't have to choose between your dreams and your mother's life. Because no one should have to work 3 jobs just to afford hope. His voice was soft, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. Because you matter to me, Layla. More than is probably wise, given my circumstances. The admission hung between them like a bridge. Neither of them was sure they should cross. Layla closed her eyes, feeling the weight of gratitude and something deeper, more dangerous. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. Build the restaurant. Create jobs for people who need them. Show the world that business can be about more than profit margins. He paused. And maybe help me remember what it feels like to do something because it's right, not because it's expected. Over the next month, they met regularly to develop the restaurant concept. Always in public places, always with business documents spread between them like a shield against the growing attraction that neither of them acknowledged directly. Khalil introduced her to contractors, suppliers, and potential investors. Layla developed menus that honored her grandmother's recipes while incorporating local ingredients and dietary restrictions. The restaurant began to take shape. Noor, Arabic for light, would be located in a renovated warehouse in Pilsen, a neighborhood with a strong Latino community and growing arts scene. The menu would feature Middle Eastern and Mediterranean dishes alongside Mexican and American favorites, reflecting the cultural diversity of the area. They would source ingredients from local farms and hire from the community, offering job training and advancement opportunities. But as the project progressed, so did the tension between them. Stolen glances during business meetings, hands that lingered when passing documents. Conversations that started about profit margins and ended with personal confessions about childhood dreams and family pressures. The breaking point came on a snowy evening in November. They were working late at the restaurant space, reviewing final construction plans by lamplight since the electricity wasn't connected yet. Layla was explaining her vision for the main dining room when she noticed Khalil wasn't listening. He was staring at her with an expression of such longing that it made her forget what she was saying. Khalil, I can't do this anymore, he said quietly. I can't pretend this is just business. I can't sit across from you and talk about partnership agreements when all I want is to tell you that you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. Don't. The word came out sharper than she intended. Don't say things you can't mean. You're getting married in 3 months to a woman I respect but don't love for reasons that have nothing to do with happiness. He stood up, running his hands through his hair in frustration. My whole life has been about duty, about doing what's expected for the greater good. But being with you, working on this project, it's the first time I felt like myself instead of just playing a role. And what am I supposed to do with that information? Layla's voice was rising despite her efforts to stay calm. Fall in love with a man who belongs to someone else. Become the other woman in some tragic story that ends with me alone and heartbroken. I don't know. His honesty was brutal. I don't have answers. I just know that walking away from you feels like giving up the only real thing in my life. They stared at each other across the empty restaurant space, snow falling outside the windows like a curtain between them and the rest of the world. Layla felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling, felt the attraction she'd been fighting for weeks, threatening to overwhelm her common sense. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I know. You're engaged to someone else. I know. I won't be your secret. I won't be the woman you visit when your real life gets too suffocating. I would never ask you to be." "Then what are you asking?" Khalil was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "I'm asking for time. For a chance to figure out if there's a way to honor my family obligations without sacrificing the possibility of real happiness. I'm asking you to trust that what's between us is worth fighting for, even if I don't know how to fight yet." Before Layla could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and something in her chest went cold. Her mother never called this late unless something was wrong. "Mama," she answered, her voice tight with worry. "Habibti, I'm at the hospital. I started feeling dizzy during dinner, and Mrs. Rodriguez insisted on driving me to the emergency room. The doctors want to run some tests. I'm on my way." Layla was already grabbing her coat when Khalil touched her arm. "Let me drive you. The roads are icy and you're upset." She wanted to refuse, to maintain the distance that his confession had shattered, but the concern in his eyes was genuine, and she was too frightened to argue. They drove to the hospital in tense silence, the weight of unfinished conversation hanging between them like a storm cloud. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of waiting rooms and medical consultations. The experimental treatment was working, but it was also putting strain on her mother's heart. She would need additional monitoring, possibly surgery, definitely more time off work for Layla to provide care. Khalil stayed through it all. He brought coffee from the hospital cafeteria, found comfortable chairs in the family waiting area, and somehow convinced the night shift supervisor to bend visiting hour rules. He didn't push for conversation, didn't try to resume their interrupted discussion. He simply stayed, solid and dependable in the fluorescent-lit chaos of crisis. When the doctors finally cleared her mother to go home with instructions for follow-up care, Khalil drove them both back to their Southside apartment. He helped Layla get her mother settled, made tea, and quietly handled the logistics of prescription pickups and appointment scheduling. "You don't have to do this," Layla said, as he programmed his phone number into her mother's cell phone. "Bah, we're not your responsibility." "No," he agreed, "but you're important to me, both of you, and people take care of the people who matter to them." Her mother, despite her exhaustion, was watching the interaction with sharp eyes. "Khalil, Habibti, would you mind helping me to my bedroom? These old legs aren't as steady as they used to be." Layla started to protest that she could handle it, but her mother waved her off. "Let the man help. You've been taking care of me for months. It won't kill you to accept assistance." While Khalil helped her mother get settled, Layla stood in the kitchen feeling overwhelmed by the events of the evening. The confession at the restaurant, the hospital scare, the way Khalil had stepped up without being asked, it was too much, too complicated, too dangerous for her carefully guarded heart. When he returned to the kitchen, she was leaning against the counter, with her arms wrapped around herself like armor. "Thank you," she said formally, "for everything tonight. But I think we should keep things professional from now on. The restaurant partnership is important, but anything personal between us is too complicated." Khalil nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "If that's what you want." "It's what's smart." "That's not the same thing." He was right, and they both knew it. What she wanted was to fall into his arms, to let him hold her while she cried about her mother's illness and her own exhaustion and the impossible situation they'd created. What she wanted was to believe that love could conquer practical obstacles like arranged marriages and cultural differences and the vast gap between their social positions. But wanting something didn't make it possible. Good night, Khalil. Good night, Layla. He left without trying to change her mind, without making promises he couldn't keep or declarations that would only make things harder. The restraint was both admirable and heartbreaking. The next few weeks passed in careful professional distance. They communicated through lawyers and project managers, keeping their interactions focused strictly on restaurant business. The construction progressed on schedule. Permits were approved. Staff hiring began. But Layla found herself missing their conversations. The way Khalil listened when she talked about her vision for the restaurant, the quiet intensity he brought to problem solving. She missed the way he made her feel like her ideas mattered, like she was building something important rather than just scrambling to survive. Her mother's health stabilized, but the additional medical appointments meant Layla had to reduce her hours at the office. She worried about losing her day job, about the gap in income, about the delicate balance she'd constructed to keep their lives afloat. The solution came from an unexpected source. Khalil's assistant called to inform her that she'd been promoted to project coordinator for the restaurant development, with a salary increase that more than compensated for her reduced office hours. The promotion was presented as a natural progression, recognition of her valuable contributions to the project. Layla knew better. This was Khalil taking care of her again, finding ways to support her without making it feel like charity. The thoughtfulness of it made her chest ache with longing and frustration in equal measure. 2 weeks before the restaurant's scheduled opening, Khalil's engagement party was announced in the Chicago Tribune's society pages. A lavish celebration at the Four Seasons. 200 guests, a merger of two influential families committed to humanitarian work across the Middle East and North Africa. Layla stared at the newspaper photo of Khalil and his fiancée, both of them beautiful and perfectly composed, looking like they belonged on the cover of a magazine about successful power couples. Amara was stunning in an understated way, with intelligent eyes and a smile that seemed genuine. She looked like exactly the kind of woman who would make a good partner for someone like Khalil. The rational part of Layla's mind knew this was for the best. Khalil belonged in that world of charity galas and international business deals. She belonged in her grandmother's kitchen, creating food that brought people together. They had built something meaningful together with the restaurant, but that didn't mean they were meant to build a life together. The emotional part of her mind, the part that remembered the way he'd looked at her in the candlelight at the Ethiopian restaurant, felt like it was breaking. The night before Noor's opening, Layla was doing final preparations in the kitchen when she heard the front door chime. She assumed it was one of the staff members coming in early, but when she looked up, Khalil was standing in the dining room. He looked tired, older somehow than he had just a few weeks ago. His usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, his hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. "We're not open yet," Layla said, trying to keep her voice light. "Grand opening is tomorrow night." "I know. I wanted to see it finished before—" He trailed off, looking around the space they'd created together. The restaurant was beautiful. Warm lighting cast golden shadows on exposed brick walls, decorated with photographs from the neighborhood's history. Tables were set with simple white linens and small potted herbs that guests could take home. The open kitchen allowed diners to watch the cooking process, creating connection between the people preparing the food and the people enjoying it. "It's exactly what we envisioned," Khalil said softly. "Better, even. The staff is excited. We've got reservations booked solid for the first month." Layla wiped her hands on her apron, trying to focus on practical details instead of the way he was looking at her. "The job training program starts next week. 3 people from the neighborhood will be learning kitchen skills that can transfer to other restaurants if they want to move on. You did this. You made it real. We did this. Your investment, your connections, your belief in the concept. My money, maybe, but this is your vision, your heart. He gestured toward the kitchen where she'd been working. What are you making? Kibbe, for tomorrow's opening menu. I wanted to make sure the recipe was perfect. She hesitated, then added, would you like to try it? He nodded, and she plated a small portion, garnishing it with fresh herbs and a drizzle of tahini sauce. They sat at the bar, and Layla watched nervously as he took his first bite. It's incredible, he said after a moment. It tastes like home, like belonging somewhere. That's what my grandmother always said food should do, make people feel like they belong. They ate in comfortable silence, the familiar rhythm of shared meals bridging the distance they'd tried to maintain. Finally, Khalil set down his fork and looked at her directly. I called off the engagement. Layla's heart stopped. What? This morning. I told Amara and both our families that I couldn't go through with the marriage. His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. It wasn't fair to her, pretending I could be the husband she deserves when my heart belongs to someone else. Khalil, no, you can't have done that. Your family, the business arrangements, will survive. Amara was actually relieved. She's been in love with someone else for years, but felt the same family pressure I did. We're going to work together to restructure the business partnership without the marriage component. Layla stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. But the consequences are mine to face. I'm 34 years old, Layla. I've spent my entire adult life doing what other people expected, making decisions based on duty and tradition and strategic advantage. But sitting in that hospital waiting room with you, watching you take care of your mother with such grace and strength, I realized that some things are worth more than family approval. Like what? Like the possibility of building a real life with someone who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be. Like waking up every morning next to someone who makes me laugh and makes me think and makes me remember why I wanted to help people in the first place. Tears were streaming down Layla's face now, but she didn't try to wipe them away. Are you sure? Really sure? Because I can't be your experiment, Khalil. I can't be the woman you try on for size while you figure out what you really want. I'm sure. He reached across the small space between them and took her hands. I love you, Layla. I love your passion for this restaurant, your devotion to your mother, your ability to see potential in people and situations that others overlook. I love the way you make me want to be worthy of your respect. I love you too, she whispered. I've been trying not to, but I love you too. He kissed her then, soft and careful at first, then deeper as she responded. It tasted like possibility and hope, and the kind of love that was worth fighting for. When they broke apart, Layla was laughing and crying at the same time. Your family is going to hate me. Some of them will at first, but they'll come around when they see how happy you make me, and the ones who don't, he shrugged, their loss. This is crazy. We're from completely different worlds. No, we're not. We're both from the world of people who care about making things better. Everything else is just details. They spent the rest of the evening planning, not just for the restaurant's opening, but for their future together. Khalil would maintain his business interests and foundation work, but he wanted to be more involved in direct community development. Layla would run Noor and eventually expand the concept to other cities, creating a network of community-focused restaurants that provided both good food and good jobs. They would face challenges, cultural differences, family disapproval, the practical complications of merging their very different lives. But they would face them together, with the same commitment and creativity they'd brought to building the restaurant. The opening night of Noor was everything Layla had dreamed. The dining room was packed with neighbors, food critics, and supporters of the community development project. The kitchen ran smoothly, the service was warm and professional, and the food earned enthusiastic praise from everyone who tried it. But the moment Layla treasured most came near the end of the evening, when she spotted her mother at a corner table sharing dessert with Khalil. They were deep in conversation, her mother gesturing animatedly, while Khalil listened with the same focused attention he brought to everything that mattered to him. "What are they talking about?" Layla asked when she joined them during a brief lull in kitchen duties. "Your grandmother's recipe for mamoul," her mother said with a mischievous smile. "Khalil thinks we should add it to the dessert menu for the holidays, and your mother thinks we should start a cookbook featuring family recipes from the neighborhood," Khalil added. "Stories and food traditions from different cultures, all connected by the experience of building new lives in America." Layla looked between them, seeing the easy affection that had developed, the way they'd found common ground in their shared love for her and their mutual appreciation for the power of food to build community. "I think," she said slowly, "that sounds like our next project." 6 months later, Noor had a 6-week waiting list for reservations and had been featured in Food and Wine magazine as one of the most innovative, community-focused restaurants in the country. The job training program had graduated 15 people, 12 of whom had found permanent employment in the food service industry. The cookbook project had evolved into a neighborhood oral history initiative, preserving the stories of immigrant families while celebrating the cultural diversity that made Chicago strong. Khalil and Layla were married on a warm Saturday in May, in the restaurant's garden patio, surrounded by friends, family, and neighbors. The ceremony blended traditions from both their backgrounds, with readings in Arabic and English, music that ranged from traditional Middle Eastern melodies to Chicago blues, and a feast that reflected the same cultural fusion that made Noor special. Layla's mother, healthy and radiant after successful completion of her treatment, gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "My daughter and her husband have shown us that the best recipes combine unexpected ingredients, that the strongest communities welcome different traditions, and that love grows best when it's shared with others." As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Layla and Khalil stood in the restaurant's kitchen, washing dishes and planning the next day's menu. It was exactly the kind of ordinary, domestic moment that Layla had never dared to dream she could have with someone like him. "Any regrets?" she asked, bumping his shoulder playfully as they worked side by side. "Only that it took us so long to get here," he said, pulling her into his arms despite her soapy hands. "But I suppose some things are worth waiting for, even if they're complicated. Especially if they're complicated, the best things usually are." Outside, Chicago hummed with its usual energy, millions of people pursuing their own dreams and building their own communities. But inside Noor, surrounded by the lingering aromas of the evening celebration and the promise of tomorrow's service, Layla and Khalil had found something that transcended the complications of their different backgrounds, a shared commitment to using their love as a foundation for building something larger than themselves. If you believe that stories of unexpected connection and community building matter, that love can bridge cultural differences and create positive change, consider supporting local organizations that provide job training and small business development in your own community. Sometimes, the most powerful revolutions start with a shared meal and the radical idea that everyone deserves a chance to build the life they dream of.